guys, welcome to Deadly Departed. If you haven't been here before, if you're listening on the podcast on iTunes, then be sure to subscribe on iTunes or any other podcast. If you're watching actually on YouTube, then obviously subscribe on YouTube. And I think actually I said watch at the beginning. So anyway, what are we going to talk about today? Guys, we're going to go back to the mediumship and the afterlife side of things. We're not going to talk so much about Corona or anything that's going on at the moment. I want to jump on to something that is very dear to my heart and dear to a lot of other mediums' hearts, and that's evidential mediumship, and explaining what evidential mediumship is, and what also I like to term is spaghetti mediumship or fluffy mediumship. We're going to get right into that when we come right back. So God bless, guys. I look forward to seeing you when we come right back. Okay guys, welcome back. I'm sure you have heard time and time again that mediumship is not the same as it used to be many years ago, and to a certain extent that's actually very true. It's not the same as it used to be. Some of the evidence that you would get years ago was outstanding, and that is few and far between here. So we're going to talk a little bit about evidential mediumship and why and how to recognize it. And really, I'm not doing this to get on any mediums or to try and make some kind of evidential mediums or even myself look better than anybody else. I'm not going to do that. What I'm trying to do is to serve some education out there so that you understand the difference. And so evidential mediumship is given evidence of life after death. It's given irrefutable evidence that can be verified through either scientific processes or through third party, where you maybe have to go and verify that information, or the evidence to that individual is very, very strong. Unfortunately, what we see in the modern day, especially with young mediums that are developed way too soon, and I've seen this even with famous mediums. We don't, what they consider to be evidential mediumship is not. It's really kind of fluff and no substance. And I've seen this with young fledglings. I've seen this with young mediums coming up, and even mediums who are, claim to be professional or evidential don't necessarily give evidence. Given evidence that your grandmother has passed and, she passed with a chest condition, and that you were all there by her bedside is not evidence. And this is where we get into the realms of fluffy spaghetti mediumship. And here's the reason I call it spaghetti mediumship. Because you ever had, you got a bolognese, right? You get a bolognese and you're twisting it with a fork, and you get a bit of spaghetti, and it's a long bit of spaghetti, and when you're sucking it away, and it never seems to end. You never seem to get to, and then finally, right at the very end, when you've been sucking for your life, right? For my Scottish people, you know exactly what that means. For those of you in America, I'm sorry for my Scottish colloquialism, but there you go, I am a Scotsman. But you're sucking for your life, and you get to the end of it, and finally, the spaghetti goes into your mouth. That's a little bit of the spaghetti mediumship. And I've seen a lot of even well-known mediums do this, and it be constituted as evidential mediumship, and it's not. And where's the danger in that? The danger in that is that it lulls the sitter, whether it's one-to-one or in a group setting, it lulls them into a false sense of security. And it also is teaching, there's a lot of people accept that as amazing evidence of the afterlife, in which case it's not. And, if you're really grieving heavily, a person who's grieving heavily will hold on to anything they possibly can to get them through that grief. And anything can be a sign. Anything can be a sign. Any noise, any sound, any sight, anything they feel could be a sign. That's the way they take it. It's not necessarily evidence. And one of the sayings that I have is that one person's evidence is another man's failure. And that's also very true. But you still have to understand what really does constitute evidence from the other side. Because remember, as I talked about in my book, Deadly Departed, there's a danger. And I've had a lot of people who are grieving that have come to me that have been lulled in and got themselves in a little bit of trouble. So let's just, before we jump into what evidential mediumship is, let's talk about the spaghetti mediumship for now, okay, or fluffy mediumship. And I've seen it where you can have a sitter who's sitting with you, or sitting, a medium there, and I've seen the sitter, and the sitter is in their 50s or 60s, and they say, I've got your grandmother here, your grandmother's. But the reality is that they probably have lost a grandmother at that age. The problem is when the person who's sitting to, yes, I have, you have validated that information to the medium, and then we take that's when the first bite of spaghetti is taken, and then it's continued, okay? You've drawn it out like a long story, and it gets a bit boring, okay? So, your grandmother's passed, and you were your favourite, you're your favourite of your grandmother, and she says thank you for what you did for her when she passed, and she was a very jolly son, she kept the place, she wants you to know that she loves you, and she's very proud of what you've been doing, and she's been around your family as well, and she says you've been going through a bad time recently. Is that right? So you're then teasing them out. Is that right? Yeah, you're going through a bad time, and just know that she's around you, and just know that she's definitely, she's been around you lately, and she had a problem, before she passed as well, and with her breathing, or she wasn't eating, and you can draw that one thing out forevermore. And I've seen some really good famous mediums do this, okay, where your grandfather's passed or something else, and then just know that they're around you, just know they love you, and they know that you've been going through a bad time, and and then of course maybe that person's young and they've been around you when you've been at university or something else. You can draw that out. There is no evidence, there's no substance there. Professional mediums who are worth their salt understand what substance is. And the substance of that message is given the validation that their loved ones have been around them, and their loved ones can give them evidence that the medium doesn't know, that can be validated by the sitter. And maybe then the sitter would have to go and talk to someone. A case in point would be John Edward, for instance. If you know John Edward, or you've seen John Edward on TV, there's been many instances where he's given evidence, he's given messages to someone, and he'll say, I've got a message, can we phone someone, can we double check that, can you make the connection, because it's got to go through to someone else, and then it's validated 3 or 4 steps down the line. Okay, that is one way that it can be accepted. Now, in the same token, if the medium says you've lost your grandmother, and I understand you were very close to your grandmother, and then starts to describe the grandmother, and she was about 59, or she was 59, she was about 82 when she passed, and she had a cancer, and everybody's got cancer, so I'm not really into this whole how they passed routine, because unless it was really something unusual like a gunshot or murder or something like this where it's different, a lot of people are passing through cancer and heart attacks and stuff like that. So the way I like to look at things is I have a pyramid of evidence. I've got another lesson on that, but I have a pyramid of evidence that I have to validate that evidence on different levels. So if the message that's coming through that says, no, this is your grandmother, she passed when she was 82, or she was in her 80s, and she has got a birthday, or she passed in the month of April, she got the anniversary, or it was on the 24th of April, she's connected to a daughter called Mary, or she's connected to Mary in some way, and she was with you the other day when you were standing by the graveside, or she was with you when you held up her rosary, or she was with you when, just to give them a little bit of validation that their grandmother was around them when they did something, or she overheard you, you were speaking to, an example I could give you is on a recent sitting that I did, I said, you were speaking to this gentleman, or I'll give you the name of the gentleman that you've spoke to recently, his name was X, and it was about 2 days ago when you were speaking to that gentleman. Can you validate that? And then they can validate that, and then you can actually go through a lot more and go further into the evidence and build up the picture. But you have to know when you have to stop and move on to the next aspect. You cannot just stick with that one thing. So I wrote an article for the Other Side Press, which I'll link below, about evidential mediumship and what evidential mediumship actually is. The evidence can come in different ways, okay? It can come on how you can give proof that the spirit was around their loved one and what they did, or what conversations they had, or where they had gone, or where they had been. You can bring up memories of the past that perhaps they didn't know, and those memories validate something. Or you can actually bring in, you can get information that they don't know, that they have to go and validate in another way. For example, it could be, for instance, yes, she's talking about your daughter. Your daughter's been speaking to her friend. There's somebody called such and such, or she's been at lunch with, or she's changing her job, and you might not know this information, but then that person would have to phone, find out, and validate that information. And the validation that comes to a third level down is very, very, very important to build that evidential picture up. Anybody can say that you're going to the dentist. Anybody can say that your loved one misses you and they're around you and they're smiling a lot and they're about so big and they're so retired. It doesn't, that's fluff, okay? And you can see fluff in the media, fluff mediumship regularly, okay? If you're developing as a medium, you mustn't be frightened to try and extend yourself, to try and get more evidence. Even if you're not getting it now, you will get it at some point. You can start to develop yourself. And there's another lesson I'm going to do between developing your mediumship and meditation, which is two different things. And that's something that I was asked about recently. But you need to developing yourself and developing your mediumship is something that's very unique to you and special to you. But you mustn't be frightened to really go and try and get that evidence. If you are with a client, and the other thing is that sticking on the same subject for 10, 20 minutes, and basically, that's the spaghetti mediumship, is all full of fluff and no substance. There is no evidence there, no dates, no names, no times, places, no memories that they can confirm, no messages that can be passed on to a third person or connected with a third person, or information that they have to go and validate later to confirm that information was right. Just to say that your loved one has been around you and this is how you're feeling, and you've been going through a bad time, and she was in the hospital and you visited her, and unless you could say you were in the hospital and somebody actually missed her passing, but you were there to the left hand side and you said this, or you kissed them and did this, or you did the next thing. And I can tell you right now, I've given messages, private sentence to skeptical individuals, and the level of evidence that you give can sow that seed to change their opinion on their skepticism. But it's not your job to change them. It's just your job to get the information that you get from spirit. Remember, you're nothing but a conduit. You are not special in any way, shape or form. You are merely an empty vessel which spirit will fill up with knowledge. And you have also the capacity to make a mistake. You have the capacity to discern that information wrongly. So you're not always going to get it right. Okay? But you should begin to become aware, right? Become aware of when you're going into spaghetti mediumship. Okay? I'm not going to pick anybody out or point fingers at anything, but you can easily see that level of mediumship. The other thing is, in spaghetti mediumship, there's a big issue of building on the story of what you've seen. Okay, so an example of that might be, she had I don't know, your favourite trousers. I don't know, your favourite trousers. It's hard for me to think actually, but maybe they're coming through and they'll say, you've got a fear of planes or something, and maybe you've just picked that up psychically and not from spirit, but you've actually read that information in the aura, and they say, yes, you got a fear of planes. Yes, because she's telling me that, and she's telling me this, and she's telling me that, and she's telling me this, and I see all these people around you and everything else. The reality is, if they're telling you that in such a clear, distinct fashion, and a clear way of bringing in the communication in that, utilising that perfect English, then the evidence should match what they're telling you. And often it doesn't. And you see this a lot where they'll revert back and they're telling me this or they're telling me that. So if they're going to be telling you this, what are they telling you? Is the message substantiated with good evidence? They're telling me that you were around your cousin the other day. They watched you while you were dancing in such and such a place, and maybe name where they were or something like that, and that takes a lot of development over the years and a lot of sacrifice to be able to try and develop that level of communication. So it's not just a case of building on that, because when they give a feedback to a medium and they get excited and the medium gets excited about getting it right, yeah, and you've seen this with a lot of famous mediums, because they're telling me this and they're telling me that, and then the story gets embellished even more. Okay, because she's laughing at you. You don't like planes, and when you were young you didn't like it. You got a little bit of fear and everything. And building on the emotion where the person doesn't have a chance to say no, and there is no substance or evidence that is there. The reality is that if they're telling you that, or they see it, and here's the other thing: if they say, I can see loads of spirit around you. Okay. That means that they're seeing objectively. And if they're seeing objectively and they say they're standing next to you there, they're standing next to you there, or I got such and such here, and they're seeing this objectively, it means they're experiencing this outside of their senses, outside of themselves, okay, in a physical form. The reality is that mediumship should be absolutely outstanding then. They should be able to describe that person to a T, scars, colours, eyes, little nuances about them, but they don't. The reality is that they might perceive spirit subjectively, which is inside of them, and they get a feeling that spirit may be there. Again, this kind of lulls the sitter or the recipient into a false sense of security. So if you're going to, as a medium, say, I can see that person, I can see lots of spirits in the room, then you better be sure that you can actually give that message to a T, exactly how they look, even down to their hair colour, their hairstyles, everything. But the reality is it's not, and it's kind of leading the person wrongly. Rather would say something like, I can perceive that spirits around us at the moment, and this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm hearing clairaudiently, and validate the information. Okay, it's not about, if you're going to say that you're seeing spirit clearly, that's going to match up to the evidence. So I could go on and on and on about evidence and everything about it, but I kind of want to just cut this down a little bit and just give you enough so that you understand. Check the article below on the other side, press TOSP. It's a bit more in depth than what we're talking about, but understand what spaghetti mediumship is and what fluff mediumship is. If you're a developing medium, work on pulling out that evidence, and there's different ways and techniques of actually getting that evidence and working toward it, okay? And that's developing and communing with spirit and developing your relationship with spirit. It's not just about meditation or having a little practice with some little exercises. There's a lot more that goes into that to be able to enhance the level of evidence that you get. There came a time where I couldn't get names and stuff like that, and I had to learn the hard way. I had to learn about how to develop that side of things and then get that level of evidence there. So it's possible for everybody who's developing. Everybody has the capacity to develop this to a certain extent, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication to be able to do that. But be aware when you're going into that spaghetti mediumship. And for those of you who are going for readings, or for those of you who are watching and learning about mediumship, or even going and seeing a medium working, just be aware. Don't judge them, okay? Because they might be learning or they might be developing themselves, but just be aware what the different levels are. I will go more in depth into this side of things later in another video, where I'll go right into it and I'll actually run a presentation on it, and so you can understand at a deeper level. But that's me just want to give you a little bit of a taste of how evidential mediumship should be, and what spaghetti mediumship actually is. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people will accept spaghetti mediumship as real mediumship. So guys, if you've got any questions, please hit me below or message me, join me on Instagram. come and if you've got a question, you just want to talk privately about it, or you're a medium and you maybe want to, just get a different perspective, then do so. You'll get me at Spiritual Medium on Instagram. That's where I normally respond to people. And if you've got any questions, hit it below. I'll respond. Thank you for spending time with me today. I might have gone on a little bit. I hope it's not been too much of a soapbox type routine, but just understand a little bit more about what real evidential mediumship is. And remember, one man's evidence is another man's failure, but the evidence must stack up. Ask me about the pyramid of evidence and I will teach it in another lesson. God bless.